first question actually is as a warm-up. Do you reckon that most academics are they just like being contrarian?
Oh, I think.
And do you think they really add anything to the practice of marketing?
Yeah, I think they do. There is an element of that. Like if you take behavioral economics, right, which is very annoying. Behavioral economics, if you know the literature, it has a couple of really valuable inputs, but most of it is, oh, you thought it was a dog. No, it's a cat. Do you see? It's all hand trickery, and that can be annoying, right? But there is a role for academics and theorists to play in puncturing the practitioner way of thinking. If you take salience as an example, the data completely supports it, yeah? We've been on a mission for 30 years in brand management to fuck around with purpose and personality and all that other stuff. It's completely pointless. It may have a role to play with other stakeholders, and there's a case to be made there. But in terms of consumers, I think one of the things that's coming out of Ehrenberg Bass is this solid evidence-based literature, which is paradigmatically challenging to what I would call the American school of the 90s, that most of us grew up on. If you ever look at Kevin Keller and David Arker's work, which I grew up on, it has a little salience gateway, a little awareness gateway, and then it's, what's the image and what's the personality and what are the beliefs, yeah? If you look at Ehrenberg Bass and what I would call the new theory of brand management and brand equity, it inverts that. And it says, most of this is salience. And if you've got that, you are probably 70 to 80% of the time going to win the sale. And by the way, that's a B2B statistic more than a B2C. If you look at what the data says, if you're not in market yet, but you're looking for corporate lawyers, if the brand that you've created salience for is you, 70 to 80% of the time, you will win that when they go through this very rational, extensive thing. So that was counterintuitive and contradictory, but I think it will eventually take us down that path.
It was a general question.
That was a long string.
It was a general question about contrarianness. It seems to me that you don't cut out anything in the academic world unless you take a strong position different from everyone else. And then once you have to really stick with it, try and ram it home, which seems to me Byron Sharp does. Because I don't agree with the argument that salience is the only thing at all. But can I come back to that in a minute?
Okay.
So my next question is Mark Ritson a brand?
Well, yes and no. I think what I learned, I once nearly bought Kylie Minogue's house. This is a good segue, right? So she had a house on French Island. She was with Olivier Martinez at the time. And I read in my wife's Hello magazine that they were having troubles and she was going to sell their new house. And I was like, hang on, this might be all right here. We could have a look at it. We went down and we looked at her house, yeah? And when I talked to her father, one of the things he was telling me, we had a very interesting chat about this house that we didn't buy, was that no one refers to Kylie as Kylie. They all refer to her as Min, to the point where the name Kylie means literally nothing to her family. And it's a very interesting insight, and it happens more often than you might think with these celebrities. They have a brand which is out there, which is commercial, but they themselves are not that. So yeah, to some degree, there is a probably digital version of me which exists, and then there's me, who has no interest in...
Have you registered your brand name?
We've talked about this before. You know that I haven't, no. No.
The brand guru hasn't registered his own brand name.
Every time we get pissed, which is relatively frequently, he goes on about this, like ad infinitum. I introduced him to my dad. He tried to explain to my dad about why I should trademark my name. And my dad's like, what are you talking about? Just ignore it.
Yeah, Eric is far more sensible.
He's far more interesting.
No, it's a serious question, actually, because Mini MBA, which is the name of your new company, is a very generic name, which anyone could swipe. And
no, that's registered, yeah.
Well, but strictly speaking, Mini MBA isn't registrable. It's descriptive. But whereas Mark Ritson, if it was the Mark Ritson Mini MBA, and then the question is, well, would it actually be worth more if it was the Mark Ritson MBA?
Maybe temporarily. The longer-term vision for Mini MBA is to make it less me and more it. So it's more, transferable and longitudinal. Because I don't want to do this forever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, but neither did Colonel Sanders.
Oh, don't start me off. No, I am very northern and working class enough to find all that quite concerning. Do you know what I mean? Like it's interesting, right? I mean, talk about it. There's a very small amount of fame attached to this, right? And my CEO, Tim, who used to be Wogan's kind of production assistant when we were all younger men, Tim always says to me, like someone will come up to me and think, oh, can I get a selfie or whatever? And he goes, it's just like working with Wogan in a little way. You know what I mean? and it is tiny, it's fucking tiny, right? But what I've seen among my colleagues is very interesting over the last sort of 20 years. Some of them have got slightly famous, and it has made them absolute wankers. You know what I mean? And I just think it's
let's take an audience vote. Who thinks Mark is a brand?
I was going to say, yeah.
Well, who thinks he's a wanker?
That's an easy one.
Who thinks he should register his trademark? Come on, there are no lawyers in here.
He's on it again, see.
The point is, well, it's not just about the name. Nowadays, you can actually register all your image rights. You can register everything you say. And that's the body of IP that creates value. And I personally think your company, your current company, would probably end up being worth a lot more 10 years from now if you were to really go for it.
All right.
In registering your thing.
Just to shut
However,
you up,
the reason,
I will get them to do it.
So he agrees.
We don't have to talk about it
anyway,
anymore.
Well, no, but the reason I mentioned it is I was thinking about it last night when I looked at your presentation, and you slag off the idea of anthropomorphism. And I was thinking about the number of brands that are named after people. So I looked on the internet, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And they all fall into different things because they want to be associated with human values. So, you know, you get the ones that are real full names connected to brands. So Colonel Sanders is one, Bjorn Borg, Fred Perry, Ralph Lauren, it's Joe Malone, et cetera, et cetera. There are real abbreviated names, so short names like Rolls-Royce, like Marks and Spencer's, like Ferrari. There are real names not connected to the purpose at all, but they're still real names. So Sarah Lee was someone's daughter. Mercedes was the bloke, what's his name, Benz's daughter.
It was the daughter, yeah, that's right.
Then there are fake names. Ann Summers being a very good one. Mark Warner is a made-up name.
Is that right?
Do you know, Mark Warner, the guy who founded it, is actually called Mark Chitty. But he didn't want to call it Chitty Holidays for obvious reasons. So Thomas Pink is my favourite. Thomas Pink Never, two Irish entrepreneurs who invented an English gentleman. You know what I mean? There's a lot of bullshit there. But you know,
Dom Perignon, not real.
Then the other thing is you get people like what's his name, David Beckham as an endorsement of Haigh. Okay, Ryan Reynolds endorsement of Aviator, and so on. So. Isn't it inevitable that brands want to be associated with people? And doesn't it play to that thing I said in the beginning of my presentation, that you know, if you can't have a reputation because you've only just started, you've got to get it from somewhere else?
No, it's a good tactic. And also, we talked about postmodernity. So what happens with postmodernity is we go full circle. So once upon a time, your great-grandparents couldn't think about brands as being human concepts. Now we take these corporate concepts and apply them to humans because we've gone full turn. So people call their children, you know, Chanel, partly because they got no taste, but also because we're now fully inverting the postmodern turn. Now we understand humanity through products. So it's pretty sad, I would say, but it's certainly true. So yeah, we've got a full inversion going on now. It isn't a good or a bad thing. It just means that when we stretch terms that came out of humanity into branding, I think we leave a lot of gaps in the application.
So I'm going to jump sideways now because Mark and I had our first on-stage punch-up in October 2015 because Mark and I had been going on for ages about, Mark had been writing inflammatory, totally inaccurate articles about the uselessness of brand valuation, so he suggested that we should have a debate called brand valuation, brilliant or bullshit, and he was on one side, and I and representatives from Interbrand and Brand Z were on the other side, which I thought was a bit unfair because we only got 3 minutes each, whereas he got 10 minutes.
Well, and there was a good line there because the woman organising the event said, "Oh, it's you against the 3 brand valuation guys. That doesn't seem fair." And I said, "Well, there's no more of them to get, so we'll just have to go with that."
And at the time, you said it had to be bullshit because the numbers come out different. It's a hypothetical valuation, not a real sale. And what does it tell you about growth anyway?
Well, hang on. No, that's not quite what I said.
The question is,
hang on.
have you changed your mind?
No. So what I actually said was there's a Swiss firm called Markables that did a very, very cool thing. They took all three valuation firms' stated values of brands, and they found ones that had actually been purchased in the year of the stated value and looked at what price was actually paid and then looked at the delta between the two. Yeah. And it did demonstrate, to be fair to Brand Finance, that they were much more accurate than Interbrand, but so would be my Beagle, right, on a good day. They were off by like 300%. And the point I've been making is the public league tables, which are a PR exercise, which David may or may not want to admit, as he launches his new 250 for the year.
We would never send out a press release or have an event, of course, you know. So.
To be fair to Brand Finance, not what they I mean, I've worked with Brand Finance when we've done a valuation. We did one at Ericsson many, many years ago. That's a different beast because then you're into the knitting of the business and looking at all the levers. That is a legitimate, fantastic exercise. The PR lists are what they are, albeit in your case more accurate than other people's. So there's a difference which no one ever understands between the top 500 and having Brand Finance come in and work out all the levers. Are you happy with it?
Well, it's interesting. I won't labour this.
You started it, man.
I won't labour this too long, but the reality is that Markables is rubbish. And the reason they're rubbish is because what they do is they go and look at balance sheets and they take the disclosed value post-acquisition of different intangibles, including brands. What they don't mention is that most finance directors strongly argue to either eliminate brand values post-acquisition because you have to amortize them, or to get them with a very low value because the residual number, which is called goodwill, you can put it in your balance sheet and just leave it there forever. You never amortize it. So most finance directors don't want brands in balance sheets at all post-acquisition. And yet Markables then went to these sets of accounts and tried to use that as proof that the brands weren't worth what we said they were worth.
What you failed to see...
I think we were right and they were wrong.
What you failed to see, David, is it made for a really good column.
It did.
It did.
Exactly. Which just shows you can't trust everything coming out of a brand like Mark. But I just wanted to... Have you generally changed your view about...
No, I think
utility of brand
I split it. When we teach mini MBA now, and it's a very difficult point to make for reasons I don't think it's that complicated, but most of the mini MBAs don't follow the logic. I think the league tables are essential because they're PR and everything else, but they actually do a disservice to what a firm like Brand Finance really does when it gets into the knitting of the accounting and the valuation and the research. Yeah, yeah. There's it's kind of like a social media picture of someone versus the reality of it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'll move on shortly, but one point that I did try to make at the time was that Interbrand and Brand Finance generally have much closer numbers, quite close, and we both apply ISO 10668, which is the global standard that is being revised in January. The one massive outlier is Brand Z, and Brand Z refused to use ISO because they don't want to disclose how they do it. So it's almost impossible to audit or challenge their number. But they're always substantially higher. So I feel that is not comparing apples with pears. It'd be better to compare us with Interbrand. I don't necessarily always agree with Interbrand, but then the other point is that if you do them at different times with different data, and you have people with a different opinion about this and that, you're going to get a different answer. But that is no different from any other asset class, whether it's a painting, a pension liability, a racehorse, or whatever it might be. Anyway, that's the end of my preaching about that. What I'd like to do is, I've got a couple of other questions I could come back to, but what I want to do is pick on mini MBA and marketing training generally. I can't quite follow the clock. I'm not quite sure. What is the time?
No, you're fine. Just keep going.
11:40. So how much longer have I got? Oh, loads of time. Right. You recently published the marketing anchors thing with Ipsos.
Yes, marketing wankers, as you like to refer to it.
Has anyone seen the marketing wankers report?
You want a one-page summary. Basically, Ipsos came along, and Ipsos is Ipsos. They're very bad at promoting themselves, but they're a very good research institution. And they wanted to do some big marketing anchors style. How do you feel about CMOs and all that horseshit, And I got them to slip in 10 standard marketing knowledge questions, right? Like, how do you calculate penetration? What does positioning mean? Like, basic sub-undergraduate stuff. So we got a representative sample of marketers from US, Canada, Australia, UK, and intermingled in all these questions of a representative big slice done by Ipsos with these questions that basically multiple choice. What is penetration? What is positioning? And basically 65% of people with marketing in their title couldn't get more than 6 out of 10. So, and these questions were incredible. What are the 4 Ps, right? What are distinctive brand assets? So we've got all these discussions about, how do we get the CFO more engaged in marketing, and, how can we learn the language of the boardroom? Yeah, that's great. Our first fucking challenge, marketers need to know about marketing, and most of them don't. You know what I mean? They just don't.
But were you surprised it was so crap?
No, I was surprised the Canadians were worse than the Americans, because the Americans have been so poor for the last 10 years. I really thought they'd finish bottom, but it was the Canadians. But it gave me a chance to go to Toronto and basically just torture Canadians for a whole afternoon, because it's one thing for them to be shit at marketing. It's another for them to finish worse than the Americans. And I just kept saying it. It was excruciating for them.
So where that leads on to is that if you look at most companies, most boards, where they have anyone in a professional capacity working for them, they always require professional qualifications. They always require that they can be checked out, like engineering, accounting, software, even human resources, law, everything you can think of, finance, except for marketing.
Yeah.
So should it be a mandatory requirement that if you get into a senior position, you have suitable accredited marketing qualifications?
We'd like that very much at Mini MBA. We actually looked at this. We looked using LinkedIn data at all the professions where you're not mandated to be trained. Because obviously if you're a doctor, you have to legally be trained. And marketing came dead last in every country. Around about 30-something% of marketers have a formal training in marketing, and 2/3 don't. My take on it is that's not the end of the world. The problem is the 2/3 that don't see any necessity to be trained in marketing. And in fact, what we show is the ones that aren't trained are far more confident in their marketing skills than the ones who are. About 80% of them think they're above average in their knowledge and skills in marketing. And it's much lower among those that have been trained. So it's pretty terrifyingly bad, and I think it's a genuine crisis. In Canada, where it was genuinely the worst, there's a sense that discipline is crumbling to the point that it isn't fixable. So what's happened is you get a lot of people that are senior without any training in marketing who now want to ensure that that is perpetuated because, partly because they really don't believe it's hampered them. So once that happens, you really lose the spirit of the discipline forever.
If one were being snide, which of course one never is,
we are.
One could say that the Mark Ritson Mini MBA qualifications, in inverted commas, are sort of marketing qualification light, and reinforce the view that a 12-hour course will make you a qualified.
Well, 12 hours is a bit strong. It's 12 weeks, but I know I take your point.
So, are you going to upgrade yourself to be like the CIM, for example?
No, I mean, a couple of reasons for that. I love the CIM, first of all, but we've trained about 50,000 marketers now, right, in 50 countries, and we always ask them at the end, what other training have you done in marketing, undergraduate, MBA, CIM, etc.? We smash everything in terms of we're just better, and there is some recency effect there, but we're the best training in marketing on the planet. Now, how do we do that in 12 weeks? Partly because we do it in 12 weeks. Nobody has fucking time for 3 years and to fly to a classroom now. London Business School, INSEAD, and the lot, they're all fucked because their model is based on a 16th century model of learning in a theater, right? It's over. right? You try and get a 28-year-old to sit in a room for 7 hours on a Saturday in a lecture theatre, listening to a bloke stood behind one of those. Good luck with that, right? We don't have any choice, right? If you're going to train marketers, my route is the only route that's going to work in the next 25 years. I can see it plainly, right? The fact that the business schools can't see it yet isn't my problem. It's my opportunity. I did Google's CMO European event about a month ago, and I flew from Australia to Amsterdam, and I only had an hour, right? And I was like, fuck, all the way for an hour. And when I got there, they said, oh, no, the whole event's an hour. You've got 14 minutes. Right? I mean, they're still paying me a fuck ton of money, right? So I'm not like upset about it, but I'm like, okay, let me just cut down my slides, But the point was, it was a good event. And the point was, the CMOs didn't want much more than an hour. And would 3 years of training in marketing be better than 12 weeks? Maybe. I don't think you need 3 years, but we haven't got that time anymore, right? And if we offer the 75% of marketers that don't have formal training in marketing the option of a 3-year degree, none of them will take it. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, unless, of course, you can't get a job unless you've got the qualification.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. But given most of the CMOs also don't have any formal training in marketing, it's unlikely we're going to put that in now. I think we've lost the head of the discipline, right?
So one of the debates that's been going on for quite a while is, do we even need marketing departments and CMOs at all? Yeah. Shouldn't you just train the intelligent people about marketing and then forget about it?
Yeah, but that's what happens when... So everyone says, well, how do we get the organization to have more respect for marketing? Marketers don't have any fucking respect for marketing. They don't know their own discipline. They don't know anything about a 100-year-old discipline, right? It starts with us. We have so many idiots walking around who profess to be experts in marketing. They have no training themselves, and what they constantly say over and over again is, oh, the marketing has changed. It's completely different from what it was before. And when they say that, what they're doing is going, don't worry, I've got no background or training in marketing, but it doesn't matter because everything's different now. That's what's going on, right? Obviously things are changing, but knowledge of where we've come from is clearly useful for where we're going, yeah? And the thing that blows me away when we do the marketing wankers stuff is, I end with this conclusion that training in marketing makes you better at marketing. And the point is, only in marketing does that claim cause a massive debate, yeah? There's a debate on LinkedIn. And I'm like, every time someone says there's a big debate about Ritson and his claim that training in marketing makes you better in marketing, I'm going, there's no debate. There's just you fucking idiots arguing the complete inarguable point. Obviously, training in marketing makes you better in marketing. The fact we live in a marketing culture that has made that point. Just imagine we are at an accounting, event, and the head accountant at Deloitte says, I'm not sure you need to have a degree in accountancy to be an accountant. I'd take someone with zoology or robotics, That's what people say at marketing conferences all the time, and it's not good enough. What happened after we published the data, because the data is pretty strong, right? When people started doing that again on LinkedIn, oh, you don't need to know about the 4 Ps, it's old-fashioned stuff, I went after them. And I said, no, that's just you, because you don't have any qualifications in marketing trying to legitimize yourself. It's not good enough. You're doing damage. Stop. And they really, really were uncomfortable and unhappy with that. But who fucking cares? It's time to make a stand, I think, for general training in marketing.
So a couple more questions, then I'll ask you lot whether you want to ask a question. Our strapline is we bridge the gap between marketing and finance.
Yes, I think it's fair.
Marketers for years have been sort of obsessed with wanting to learn the language. Learn the language of finance is the cliche.
Yeah.
Try and understand all about finance and get in the boardroom and argue it out with the finance director. Do you think that's a remotely credible possibility?
No, it's definitely not. So again, the first priority for marketers is to know base levels of marketing. We aren't talking PhD levels or MBA levels here, just base levels. 72% of British marketers don't know what a quantitative research method is, yeah? So we need to be clear what this exam was, right? It wasn't like, calculate a chi-squared of fucking loyalty component, right? Which of these is a quantitative method of market research? Nearly 3/4 of British marketers couldn't spot it, yeah? What the fuck, So our first job is to understand marketing. And then the second job, I think equally important, is when marketers go into a boardroom, it's good to know the language of finance, of course it is, but they instantly jump into the language of the boardroom, a language which they don't really properly have confidence in, and they're on a sticky wicket. What I have learned through my exposure to boards is that the superpower of marketers is first and foremost consumers. Everyone else in that room, except you, doesn't know the secret of business. They look at fucking sales charts and they impute all this nonsense from what is basically just, this is what we sold, right? Only we have the superpower of realizing if you follow the money one more step to the people who gave us those sales numbers, and we find out who they are and why they spent the money and whether they'll spend more money with us and how they feel right now, we have a much more valuable insight. And what happens tragically with most marketers is they get in a boardroom and they start talking about CAC and all this other stuff that they really don't know anything about, and they look fundamentally flaky. Instead of just going, listen, I'm your CMO, let me show you what the consumers are currently thinking and feeling and doing. That's what we should be playing. Language of finance, important, you've got to be part of the conversation. But I think so many times we end up presenting econometrics, which at the best of times is a very ropey conversation. To a CFO who goes, hang on a minute, this doesn't seem right to me. Play our strengths. We represent the consumers who pay for everything, yeah? That's the thing you want from a good CMO. Yes, to be able to have the conversation about finance. Yeah, but, pricing. Let's just talk for a second about pricing. We know a couple of things about pricing. We know most of the marketers in this room, your teams are involved in pricing. And we know as a result that 90% of your companies are underpricing your offer, because when you don't include proper consumer research and framing in your pricing, without marketers you wouldn't have that, you end up underpricing your offers. And we know that underpricing is the biggest lever of lack of profitability in a company. Yeah? That's the cost of spending the last 25 years talking about different P's. Yeah? Talking about why purpose and people are the new P's. No, they're fucking not. There were 4 P's. They were invented 62 years ago by a guy who said, if you don't remember these 4 P's, marketing won't have the impact it should have. Well, what happened? We started fucking around with the P's. People who don't even know what the original 4 P's are start inventing other P's. And what do you know? Now we're all just advertisers. The least important of all the P's. That's what we've done. And so we need marketers to be marketers again before it's too late. And it's not that hard to do, but it starts with, do you actually know the thing that it says on your business card? And using the data from Ipsos, about 65% of the time, they don't in this country. It's not good enough.
Couple of quick questions and then I'll ask you guys. Are you seriously saying you don't believe in brand loyalty, which seems to be what you're saying in support of dear old Byron?
No. So I'm not a big supporter of Byron. I'm a semi-supporter of Byron, right? We've known each other 35 years. We absolutely hate each other. It's always been... Now, look, I think he's been proven, unfortunately, to be mostly correct. Ehrenberg Bass over-exits pudding in a very unscientific way. And one of the examples is brand loyalty. Another example is distinctiveness is all that you need, right? So brand loyalty, by and large, so what happened? If you grew up in the 1990s in marketing, we completely lost our shit about brand loyalty, brand relationships. Kevin What's-His-Face from Saatchi talking absolute fucking nonsense about brand love and love marks and all of that, right? We got it completely wrong. We believed that it was all about creating these incredibly close relationships with brand loyal consumers. Every time I went to a conference, some idiot was talking about people who got tattoos of logos on their arms and all of that, right? What Byron was shooting down, and it was a brilliant thing to shoot down, was that's all horseshit. And brand loyalty does not exist as you are describing it. Every consumer that buys frequently from you is buying from your competitors as well. And it works in B2B, right? Antonio will tell you there's clients that will buy happily from her wonderful firm that are also buying in other parts of the organization from other competitor firms. Loyalty like that does not exist.
See, I just don't agree with that. It's bollocks. I mean, it really is bollocks. You know, like it may apply if you've got relatively similar products in a quick decision-making process like retail, which is where Ehrenberg Bass do most of their work, and then apply it to everything else. But it seems to me like the 5% rule applied to the 95%. You know, I just sit there thinking, can I think of brands, small brands, that people are fantastically loyal to. I put a few down. Finisterre. Does anyone know Finisterre?
Yeah, Finisterre's a good brand.
The most overpriced, ridiculous brand in the universe. They're a great brand that people love. So they're quite good product, quite nice design, but they charge about 5 times what they should. And people walk around going, "Oh, I couldn't wear that. It's not Finisterre."
Yeah, that's true. But they have
chocolates.
They have other bags. The point is, in a 1990s vision of brand loyalty, I'll only put my stuff in a Finisterre bag. It does not exist. They buy their outfits and their bags from other companies as well. That's the point.
I think the point is that people don't always just buy one brand, but
that's the point.
In most situations, given the chance, they would buy the brand that they are loyal to. Like, have you heard of Tanner Kroll handbags? No. Has anyone heard of them? Yes. Yeah, super duper, top end. Everyone who knows about handbags, well, people who use handbags, love Tanner Kroll. They collect them, they polish them, they stick them in the cupboard.
They would have other handbags.
And there are so many other brands like that. Ferrari, people are not just buyers. In fact, what's his name? Vernon Hill, who set up Metro, said, "I don't want customers, I want fans." And there's it's a bit of a corny one, but basically, it is true. People become fans. Anyway, and I think the way they do is by accentuating differentiation, which is why the other part of his so-called genius theory is bollocks too. Just about everything that comes out of his mouth is bollocks.
No, that's not true. Now, what he does is he over-eggs the pudding. So the first point is brand loyalty in the sense that I only buy from this brand does not exist. You're right in the sense that there is still some degree of repeat purchase penetration. And in terms of, again, distinctiveness is the only thing that matters. Differentiation doesn't matter. They over-egg the pudding there. Again, he's 70% right. It's mostly distinctiveness. It's mostly coming to mind. We don't like that thought because all of us here are thinking about our brands in an incorrect, non-market oriented way. But there is also room for relative differentiation, at least in what I've seen with brands as well. The Ehrenberg-Bass dogma rules all of that out.
Okay, enough of me. How many questions can we have, Annie? 3? Okay, who wants to ask a question? Yep, you over there.
Hi. A few of the things that you've talked about have really resonated, and I find that marketing itself as a profession has a brand problem, and I think you touched upon that. For a discipline that's been around for so long, we seem to really have this thing about proving ourselves in the boardroom and speaking the language of the board. I find that quite patronising because I often find that the board think very internally, particularly the companies I've worked for. You've got operations people, you've got accountants. We do bring the market perspective. So how do we challenge that? How do we change that? Is it the responsibility of the likes of CIM and the educators? Because marketing is business. And so I find that I spend time educating my leaders, and I'm not at leadership level, and educating them about business, about strategy.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating.
No, it is, and it shouldn't be your responsibility to have to do that. The accountants, the CFO doesn't have to go in and go, so let me explain why we need a CFO here, right? That's not the conversation. It's not your fault or any of our fault, but we have to kind of justify our place. When I have spoken to really good CFOs, one of the things that becomes apparent that you and I, again, we can't take responsibility for this. If you're a decent, experienced CFO, you're probably about 60. And what we don't appreciate is how many complete dickheads from marketing they've had to put up with before you sat in the chair. Yeah? And what damage that has done to your reputation through no fault of your own. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. It's good of you to say, right? But I think that's one of our problems, right? The lack of consistency in our discipline then means we've got to kind of fix it in our old age. The only advice I can give you, and I do feel your pain, is again, play to our strengths of the consumer intimacy and knowledge. When COVID hit, the only good CMOs were the ones going, look, never mind, and again, we're an advertising world now, so, let me show you the ads. The only good CMOs were the ones going, this is what's going on in the consumer world right now. Let me share with the business how the consumer is thinking. That's our superpower. And when if you ever introduce data to a board, qual or quant, they look at it like you've just introduced, a bunch of illicit drugs to the room. It's like, what the fuck is this? And you're like, this is data from the people that pay for everything. Like, what the fuck's going on here, right? If you ever show them conjoint for pricing, right? Because they don't realize you can do like research on pricing. Right? If you ever go, well, can I just share with you what consumers are prepared to pay in an experimental setting? And they're like, how do you mean? Like, rather than looking at costs or competitors, can I show you the data from the people that we're going to put these prices on? What the fuck, can you do that? It's like, yeah, we can do that. Wow, look at this. It's like, it's like marketing exists. So I think we have to play it that way. But I do feel your pain.
Another question.
Good to see you.
You've got to get your hands up quicker if you want to ask a question.
How do you think AI is going to change marketing and marketing team structures?
We're going to have less. The Anthropic data I've seen, I think, points to about a 60% reduction in marketing loads eventually. I think that's probably about right. Nobody knows. I think you're seeing it already. No senior marketers are moving jobs anymore. That's a supported point from the data. And they're not moving because they're smart and they're scared quite correctly that if they move, they might then lose their jobs. So they're staying where they are. And that's very clear from the marketing data. Down below, we're recruiting less junior marketers because they're the ones that we don't need because of AI. And so when you lock that in for the next 10 years, I think what we'll end up seeing is less marketers per head with a more senior bias, and the roles will change. I'm pretty positive about what AI does to the capabilities of marketing, but not to the number of marketers. I think we will have less. And interestingly, I don't think you need to do a course in AI. I think that makes no fucking sense at all to me, right? I always use the metaphor of a horse and a jockey, right? It's not like Lester Piggott learned how to be a horse. Do you know what I mean? He didn't ever run on all fours. He knew fucking nothing about what it was like to be a horse, right? He was a good jockey, right? In the same way, marketers don't need to learn about fucking AI. AI is AI. It's there. You press the fucking button and it does it. Do you know what you want it to do, right? If you take synthetic research, it's very clear now. Synthetic data is cheaper, quicker, and more accurate than doing actual consumer research if you do it properly. But to do synthetic research, you need a giant AI system that's capable of doing it. We have that. But the marketer riding the horse has to know what synthetic methods it wants to create, how to build a sample, what questions to ask, what methods to fuse together. And again, 70% of British marketers don't know what a fucking quantitative method is. So it doesn't matter how good AI is, if the jockey is fundamentally an idiot, the horse isn't going to win the fucking derby. You know what I'm saying? So I think we'll also see that structural change too. But it's a good thing for marketing. It's going to be decimating for marketing careers because any process is vulnerable to it.
Although presumably that's another reason why qualifications and training
Yeah.
will be at a premium.
When we model it, ironically, using synthetic data, Mini MBA comes out slightly better in 10 years. There are certainly less marketers, but to your point, David, there's more of a premium on being trained so you can operate AI and also in a competitive job market.
Okay, there you go.
Thanks, David. Implicit in what you've talked about this morning is that trust drives success. And I started my career on the Anchor Butter brand many years ago. Too many years ago to think, really. 10 years after I'd moved on, it was voted one of the most trusted consumer brands, but was also the fastest declining brand in dairy at that time. And he had Hovis up there, which again has gone through its trials and tribulations. How does brand finance, therefore, deal with that challenge of being highly trusted, but also failing?
Well, when I was talking about trust, I think I made it clear that I think both reputation and trust are measures that are put against individual attributes or groups of attributes. And you can easily find that a brand like Qantas, for example, where they get a very bad trust score. The reality is that people go with Qantas because it has by far the best safety record in the whole world. And it is always on time. and it actually has a great service. Qantas is a great airline. So if they're not trusting it, I don't know why, it's for some other reason. So when they're asked, they say, I don't trust them, but everyone buys Qantas because they know it delivers. It's a bit like Ryanair. And so there's a detachment between a general question, do you trust them? I mean, nobody trusts Michael O'Leary, but everyone flies Ryanair because they trust them to be on time. So to me, there's a sort of bifurcation between a general thing called trust and people's specific trust in what the brand does. And that's why, to some extent, I think the whole trust debate is a bit fruitless. What really counts is what are all the attributes and the mix of attributes that determine that you pick one brand rather than another. And how do you as marketers play them up and down to get the differentiation, which allows you to get brand loyalty?
And if I can
got them all in one sentence.
If I can jump on his point, though, I think it's a great question. And to jump on David's point, and that's one of the problems with trust. It's a gestalt, and it pulls all these things together. I think one of the lessons I've learned is you as a senior marketer really have to call out the 3 or 4 things that you are going to focus upon. You don't need a gestalt. What you need is these are the 2 or 3 things that I am going to focus upon for 10 years in order to build this brand into a stronger thing. And I think that's where things like trust tend to get in the way a bit. Just like when I see a brand positioning that has more than one slide, I know it's not going to do anything because it's more than one slide. When I see trust being overused, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's an opportunity cost to trust, which is within that, to David's point, these are the 3 things driving trust here. Well, let's just fucking focus on those 3. That's what we should be moving towards.
But also on the subject of Anchor butter, which I always used to eat.
Fine butter.
It started off as New Zealand butter, and then I think probably because we got kicked at couldn't use New Zealand butter anymore, it became English butter, and it's the price changed and the cost changed.
It's always the Irish. They cause all the problems.
Oh, it comes from Ireland, does it?
No, it's Arla. So they got into relationship. So the business was fucked up by the CEO in the UK, who we won't talk about, and Unilever got into a relationship with Arla so they could close their own factory and move operations, the production, to Arla. And then over time, the brand relationship also moved to Arla, and therefore the New Zealand relationship disappeared, which is when it became a West Country dairy.
Got it. So you couldn't call it New Zealand.
So it's a very tricky one. I mean, it had an old reputation, and therefore people trusted it. Things got in a mess. So gradually the trust will decline and they'll lose out. Another question. Yep.
Hi there. And Mark hasn't paid me to say this, but I've done both the
It's better be the last one, I think, hasn't it? Yeah.
And brand management. And
Good
I
man.
feel I'm a better marketeer for.
You're a beautiful man.
Can I quote that on LinkedIn?
Please.
Back to the subject of trust and looking at the professions across the board. I see that Ipsos rates marketeers as the 4th least trusted profession out there.
In the whole league table, right?
League table.
Politicians and real estate agents, and then it's
I think
us.
social media influencers number 1, government ministers number 3.
There's one box which is just general fuckers, right? And we're under them, you know?
How do we as marketeers improve that trust, or does it actually matter?
I don't think
as we do our jobs well.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think we're always going to be seen. I always like the contrast between how we're seen, which is we're on the top floor of these buildings smoking cigars, right? Manipulating the perceptions of the world, right? We have these joysticks and we can make people think different things, right? And you contrast it with how shit we actually are, right? We couldn't find our ass with either hand. Do you know what I mean? But the perception of us is that we're these incredible, using subliminal practices. We're making you think this and that. I think we have to let that go. We will always be entirely distrusted and hated by almost everyone. Like it's always, I still, when I did a degree in marketing in the 80s, and I still remember how thoroughly fucking disappointed everyone I ever met was. You say, what are you doing at university? I'm like, marketing. And they're like, oh. It was like you kicked their dog or something, you know what I mean? Everyone was like, really?
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Everybody hates you, don't worry.
Get used to it.
We reached 10 past 12, so I think I'm supposed to wind up now, aren't I? Thank you all, and thank you, Mark.